Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so I want to. All right, so the recording started already. So let me share, and we're gonna bring up some stuff here. I want to be able to keep an eye on the class, so you'd see me kind of position things like this. All right, you guys seeing the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna use it like this because I want to be able to see the list of names, so that I can call on people, see if people have questions and so on. All right. So we are looking at the first presentation, which is really going to be chapter one plus a little look at the learning outcomes from the course. So that's the first thing we're going to look at, is our course description. This is not meant to be the end all and be all of leadership studies. It's really an introductory course, and therefore we're going to leave a lot of room for exploration for you further on. The approach is one of very personalized. It's going to require you doing a lot of self reflection, because it's going to be looking at us sharing our personal take on things, looking at our own value structures and sharing that through a lot of self analysis. Um, so we're going to be seeing a lot of that type of, of, of assignments that are going to encourage you to do the self analysis. You all know already about the assignment on self analysis. Then we have to do the evaluation of our leadership potential. That comes with the leadership action plan coming up at the end of the semester. Um, a lot of the things that we're going to cover in the class, we're going to be looking at doing some additional reflections on it. The midterm does that. The debate kind of puts into practice some of the things that you're going to be doing as well. So, course objectives, of course, understand various theories of leadership, understand and defend various methods of making decisions. And here we're talking about ethical decision making. Now, interestingly enough, you already make ethical decisions, but you may not know it in the context of what the theory has to say. So hopefully there's some sort of aha moments that you experience when we go through the theory, or I should say more importantly, when you um, go through the theory. All right. Um, Ms. Brown, Tiffany, welcome. Um, that's going to be a marked difference here in terms of the way this course is done, as opposed to other courses, is that I am giving the responsibility of sharing the information and teaching the class over to the class itself. So it's going to be a curious way for us to try and get you involved with the material. We're going to be looking at teams. There's a chapter on teams and groups that we're going to be trying to do some work there. But in the class itself, we're going to engage in team building exercises from small teams to larger teams to be able to give you the opportunity to put into practice the theory and develop your understanding of teams and teamwork. And of course, we're going to be looking at a lot of the issues that face current leadership issues. Now, this one here is most interesting in the sense that it's asking for the course that you would be able to display and modify behaviors indicative of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethics. So we have to kind of break this down a little bit. Um, hold on, guys. All right, sorry about that. All right, so what do you understand from the term behavior modification? Miss Khan, Alicia Khan, can you open your mic and answer? Miss Khan, no? How about Miss Samput?
Sir, I really can't see.
You can't say you don't understand what behavior modification is. Think about it.
Um, okay, well, I guess it's like to I could be wrong, but I guess it's to like this a certain way how you behave as an individual.
Uh huh.
Oh, I have more to that. Okay, and well, I guess it's like the time and place and everything, like how you move, like at a certain setting that
Hmm.
you or area that you're in.
Well, okay, you kind of going off point. You started about right. So behavior
Well,
has
and
to deal with how we behave, right? But behavior modification is a term that is utilized to discuss how people go about changing behavior. All right, that makes sense now?
yes, sir.
Yeah, makes sense. Have you ever engaged in, well, you sound very young, so let me ask it from a different experience. Have you ever had your behavior changed by other people? And what techniques of behavior modification did they utilize?
Um, when you say change by other people, like do you mean like how I would act towards like if somebody get me angry or something like that?
Those are some of the things that can can trigger behavior all right. So as we grow up, we develop certain types of behaviors. Not all of the behaviors are appropriate, correct? So screaming and shouting at the top of our lungs is not something that is considered um, good behavior, right? So what we find happening is that our parents, our teachers will try to change that behavior to bring us in line with what the expectations are of people in a, let's say, in a classroom or in public places. So how has that happened? How have parents traditionally done behavior modification? Come on, guys, this y'all. I know you all know this. It's just that the probably not think. Come, yeah,
So,
Judah. Yeah.
so I don't know if I'll be right, but I'll just share an experience. I remember when I was going secondary school, I used to play football, and my grades used to be dropping a lot. So my parents took me out of the football to ensure that my grades, to ensure that I balance the grades and football.
Hmm.
So that's my little experience to share pertaining to that.
Right. So that technique that your parents use. Anybody else wanted to share something that they had? Any of y'all get licks from your parents? Good Lord, we get we're going too critical with this. We're thinking too technical. Anybody here ever got punished by their parents? Not necessarily um, um, corporal punishment, but some form of punishment to make you
Excuse me,
think
sir.
about what you. Yeah, Jesse.
So I was just about to say how well, I don't know if teachers do it now, but when I was in high school, not high school, primary school, sorry, like
Mm.
if you would misbehave, a teacher would like give you some lash on your hand with a ruler or
Well,
something. Like
now that is it can't really take place in schools anymore, because
yeah.
that type of behavior modification technique has been ruled as non-compliant with policy. But the first place we get behavior modification happening is in our homes, our parents. And our parents aren't governed by too much heavy monitoring. So none of you all got licks when you were growing up, or put in timeout, or lose privileges.
No, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. Like, that's not. I'm reading what is good. Like, are you even training if you didn't get licks? Exactly that's my point. Are you even a trainee if you didn't get licks? Well, interestingly, um, Ms. Khan, a lot of parents don't condone corporal punishment anymore as a means of behavior modification. Though it's one of the more effective ones. What they tend to use is more psychological stuff like taking away some of your privileges, or using negative reinforcement activities. So the problem with behavior modification is that it requires a change in perception by an individual to see a particular type of behavior as being negative. So you either punish somebody in one way or the other in order to get them to change their behavior. The problem with punishment, or what is called external stimulus, um, is that that negative reinforcement, oftentimes in its absence, the person reverts back to that original behavior. So if you wanted to correct somebody, the better technique to utilize is to get them to understand for themselves that that behavior is dangerous or not safe or is damaging to them in the long run. That's sort of like as a child, we are very curious about everything around us, and what we like for example, pushing your finger into plug receptacles, playing with the electrical items and that type of stuff. Um, any of you all ever got corrected for doing that thing, poking things into, like you take a toy and the toy is small and you try to poke it into a plug? Any of you all ever did that?
Well, so something similar to that, yeah.
Right, Kristen? Tell me about your experience. Share with the class.
Right. So when I was a little child, so, um, uh, I didn't really know any better, as a little child, right? But like, I used to had this toy monster truck now, so I'm like, the first thing I do was I decided, hey, I'm going to stick this off my sister here while it moving. Like it was like a kind of remote trucker, and I get real trouble. I learned to never do that again. So never
What
again
did
in my
your parents
life.
do? What did your parents do?
Oh, I get some good licks up my bottom. So
You know
yes,
why, right? Because, I mean, as simple as that is, your sister's younger than you, right?
yeah,
Right. So one of the reasons why that happened is because of the tenderness of her age, the violence of the wheels turning could have actually ripped her hair out, and with that, her skin from her scalp,
yeah,
and that could have caused permanent scarring because at that age you might have been able to extract all the growing cells from that patch that you might have pulled out. So, more important, what I've realized too in a lot of instances, one of the reasons why our parents get so upset with us when we do things like that is fear, because they're scared of what kind of damage could have happened, or how badly you could have hurt yourself or somebody else, and their reaction is it tends to be indicative of that type of behavior. I mean, it requires you to get into a position of becoming a parent yourself and starting to realize how scary it is, for us to sit back and allow children to make mistakes and learn from it, because that's one of the biggest things the most important ways in which we learn about the future, or we learn things, is by making a mistake and correcting that mistake. Un- un- Unfortunately, sometimes we don't actually see the mistake. We just sort of, kind of work it through through the thing. Now, the issue with external stimulation for behavior modification is that in its absence, you're likely to go back to your original behavior. So behavior modification is best when it's internally motivated, meaning that you want to make this change. And this course, and the reason why I'm talking about this is because this course has this very lofty ideal of saying that you will display behavior modifications indicative of personal philosophy of positive leadership and positive ethical values. So we're making a huge leap here with this course, saying that one of its objectives is to get you to change your personal behavior. Now, that is because we are hoping that when we go through the material and we start to deal with all the concepts and discuss it and understand what's happening in the classroom, we're hoping that you guys can, start to see for yourself that there's certain changes that you may be required to make in order to become a better leader. So again, very lofty. And it comes from very simple beginnings. So we'll think about it from that perspective. And this is just the course objectives. So we talked about the textbooks. You've by now you've downloaded both textbooks of the e-classroom. The majority of the chapters I am dealing with come from the Exploring Leadership text. We're going to be doing the vast majority is going to come from this textbook. We have a few. Anytime you see the word daft coming up on the schedule, you'll know that that is the daft textbook. So like this is from the daft and these down here. So you'd realize we only have 4 chapters coming out of the daft, but the rest 6 chapters are going to come out of the leadership exercise class. Make sense? All right. So pay attention to that, please. Okay. So in the first element here, in terms of the section that we're looking at here, this is leadership in the modern world. This is the name of the chapter that we're going to be dealing with. So primarily what we're going to be looking at is leadership in the 21st century, leadership as it exists around us today. The textbooks we're utilizing come from a US base. So we are going to have to bring to bear on this the Caribbean experience, the local parlance to this particular thing, because there are very few textbooks that are available for free use and distribution that have the Caribbean context. So we're going to have to bring that in on it by ourselves. It doesn't mean that the text is not relevant. The text is relevant in terms of the way in which it goes about examining the material, but it will become incumbent upon us when you are presenting your chapters to make the connection with our personal experiences here in the Caribbean, specifically here in Trinidad. So it's going to be something that is going to be intrinsic upon yourself to add to your presentations as much local content or local references that we can all get, which is why I talked about getting licks. All right, as one of the Caribbean countries, and I love the statement that Miss Khan made about are you Trini if you never get licks, and that the reality of it is that that's a Caribbean thing. Caribbeans parents or Trinidadian parents in particular, don't spare the rod, is cut your ass left, right, and center. There are few parents I've come across that don't use some form of corporal punishment. So, and it's far and few between, because when your mom or your dad tired and they come home and you playing the fool and you need some correction, the easiest thing is would up bap on your ear, don't do that again. You understand? Good cut to us and you're good to go. All right. So understand we have to bring into the mix in terms of all this theory coming out of the United States and the UK. What happens here? And that's going to be our responsibility when we're going to be looking at it. So the model we're looking at is actually referred to as the relational leadership model, and we're going to see that name come up a lot. And that's because in the very definition that the model has about what is leadership, it speaks to the critical nature of relationships. So leadership is a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. That means that the focal point of leadership in this model is about the relationships. Now, if we think about this from a logical point of view, consider the subjects that you have done really well in school, and consider the relationship you've had with that particular teacher or lecturer. Consider that relationship. The more positive the relationship was or is, the better you perform in a particular subject area. The worse the relationship, of course, the inverse is always true as well. Is that something that you can see in looking back at your own personal histories of schooling, that you see that type of correlation between the quality of a relationship and the quality of your performance? Anybody can justify that or bring that to bear? Miss Francis? Miss Ramuta? Miss King? Come, somebody, open up and say so. Yes, Lynn Marie. Who's Lynn Marie?
Oh, I agree with it, but I had a relationship with a teacher that wasn't good, but
Wasn't
I
good.
still did well in the class.
Yeah, yeah, that happens. That happens
So
too.
it not necessarily mean that just because you and a teacher might not get along, you would do bad.
Yeah, but did you have to do things to mitigate against the relationship?
Mm, kind of. I don't know. I feel like it was a bit unspoken. Like, yeah, there's something unspokenness between you and another teacher. Like, she don't really like me, I don't really like she, but I do the work. She marked the work fairly. I pass.
Well,
It
that
was
was
kind of like that vibe.
well, that's actually really good because in a lot of instances, when I talk about poor relationship, I'm also talking about poor character. So it would have been a case where, so at least you were in a situation where the teacher wasn't being petty and being vindictive in their behavior. So that's really important. That that has taught you a very important lesson. But in a lot of instances, when you come across teachers with whom you had poor relationships with, there's a tendency for students to perform badly because they don't have any other recourse in terms of finding direction, except if they go and find somebody else who gets lessons for them and that kind of stuff. Um, that's what I was kind of hinting at, and that tends to be unfortunately one of the truths in a lot of our schools, where teachers are in a classroom and they're not there for the students' benefit, but they're there simply because it's seen as easy money, so to speak, and they really don't put in the effort required. But anybody has had that situation happen to them besides Miss Lynn Marie.
I never had this situation happen to me, but I've been around classmates that I watch that has happened with.
Hmm.
Because in B school, like when I was in high school, it's had this teacher, and she was a social studies teacher, and she wasn't really genuine. Like, she had this kind of energy, and it never used to really go well with when she was teaching. And then after a while, like because of the way how she was moving, they could realize that the class started to, not really perform well, and
Right.
things was really tough. And the situation was brought up, but she still was, you know, doing that, and you could have realized the impact that it had on the students in the class because they never really had that good energy towards students.
That's true. I've seen that happen before myself. I've had personal experiences with it both as a student and as a teacher. Interesting, my worst experience with teachers that was at university. Um, we had a teacher that was, would never talk to the class. He always spoke to the board. I never understood that. He'd come and teach us. Back in our days, chalk was the thing. You come in a classroom and there were like 150 of us in this hall, and he'll be teaching applied mathematics, and he'll do a problem on the board and stand in front of the solution, turn his head to the side and say, "Do you understand?" and then erase it. So we used to have to sit to the sides of the class so that we could try and see what he was doing. It was absolutely ludicrous. And in the lecture, you could not ask questions. No questions were allowed. If you asked a question, I remember one time somebody went up on the board before he came and wrote, "Please speak to us," begging. There was a young girl. But it was a waste of time. I actually had to find somebody else to go and, um, do the entire math program with. Back in my days, this was before where you got semesterized stuff. We'd get a course taught to us for the entire year, so you can imagine the bulk of the content that we were doing in the whole year. So we didn't have like a introductory level, intermediate, advanced. We just had everything all at once, and it was ridiculous the way in which we went through that class. And a lot of people failed that advanced math class because it was one of the prerequisites for us to be able to do other higher level courses in the program. So it was critical. But with the failure rate being that high, it meant that a lot of people had to go and trail that course another year, and not just a semester, but trail the course for a year to be able to go and do the other computing courses that we had to do. It's really something else. But I came across that a lot more at a senior level than I did at junior levels, fortunately. But I understand now that a lot of teachers in the secondary school system tend to have poor relationships with their students for whatever reason. All right, coming across. So now we want to start looking at leadership itself. So when the text starts to look at leadership, it starts to look at it from different points of view or different frameworks. One of the first frameworks that it looks at leadership through, when we think of leadership, is through politics. Politics and political science tries to look at leadership through the use of power and influence. So when we think about power and influence, we start to think about individuals in our environment who have um, a lot of power based upon the position that they've been able to attain and the kind of influence that they're going to exert over the rest of people around them. So if we look at this, this is a NATO um, heads of government meeting, and we see a number of leaders from all around the world. You'd notice a sparsity of female leaders here at this level, because here we're talking about premiers, prime ministers, and presidents. You can see our friend in the middle there. And you could really see just one, two, four women in this NATO summit. And this is decision making at a level at which you're talking about these people are responsible for world peace. Um, the influence that any one individual here, and interestingly enough, the President of the United States has massive voting rights. And here they were going to get together to discuss the whole issue of the Russian war, the situation in the Middle East. There's always a situation in the Middle East, as far as I can see. And the decisions that they're making here impact lots of individuals all around the world. All right. Welcome back, Ramona. 23. Okay, somebody coming that I didn't see. You're back. You're home now?
Yes, I am, sir.
All right, cool. Just checking. There's somebody that's here that I didn't catch on my register. Tiffany Brown. Nope, put her in. All right, if you're not seeing your name checked off, yeah, hide this one for now. It means I didn't capture you for some reason. 21. Okay. All right, I see what happened there. All righty then. So let's get going back with this. All right. So this is the main thing that we talk about when we're dealing with political leadership through politics. We're looking at individuals who acquire positions of power, leadership in some countries, and that then how do they use that power around them to influence others? That's a big thing. So if we think about another organization, the G20 countries, and we look at the leadership of the countries that end up coming there, what you're looking at are those countries with the most amount of economic power, those that are sitting at the apex of income earning and the impact that they have on the other countries that have to trade with them or work with them in terms of this. So this is the G20 is a list of the the largest economies in the world. So again, one of the reasons why they would end up, or a leader from that country would end up with a lot of power, is because of the economic status of that country. All right? There's presidents, rankings, and flags and whatever. Forget about that. But the list here is all of these countries, the leaders from these countries exhibit a great amount of control and influence on the world around them. So we understand that perspective of leadership from a political standpoint. Another way in which we look at leadership is leadership seen through management. And when we talk about management, the better leaders are seen as those who make the most amount of money. And they make the most amount of money because they achieve the outcomes of the organization via their leadership of subordinate staff around them. So that element is something that we want to look at as well as a method that when we think about leadership, we come to this particular idea. So this is a list of the most powerful people in 2024. So you see all of these people. How many of these companies are you aware of? You should be you should be aware of the companies, but not necessarily the people behind them. Um, but some names are more popular than others. How many of these people do you? Well, everybody should be familiar with Elon Musk. He's been in the news a lot. Yes,
Yes, sir.
Caleb. Yeah. What about Tim Cook?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Apple. Mark Zuckerberg. Most people will be.
Yes, sir.
Sam Altman. Possibly not. Yes.
No.
Yes, sir. I
Yeah.
have no idea who that
Y-
is.
Yeah. Um, this guy from Microsoft. We quicker link to Microsoft, Bill Gates, than we do this gentleman who's the current CEO. All right. But understand these individuals have risen to a position of business power, management power, leaders of business, due to the effectiveness that they have been able to display through the earnings of their companies. You following me? Um, so it's sort of like the who's the richest people in the world kind of situation. That's the kind of thing that you come across with it. All right. I'm surprised that Warren Buffett is still in this list in 2024 because he's been on this list for a very long time. Never really at number one, but always somewhere in the top 10, which is quite interesting. Something to think about. It's not always good to be number one because that means you get too much attention. All right. Because at one point in time, Amazon, Jeff Bezos was up at number one too. Huh? So think about it from that perspective. All right. Another element or methodology that we're going to be looking at leadership through is through anthropology. So basically, in anthropology, we're talking about looking backwards, looking at past civilizations and examining how those cultures, those people developed their leadership in their societies. So they're no longer around for us to get them to tell us, what's happening. So we have to kind of put things together through a system of pulling together whatever we can about their society, looking at their culture and the cultural influence, looking at the language they use, the tools. Think about this as like an archaeology dig. So you could get physical things, artifacts and whatnot. You try to learn as much as you can from whatever histories that they have. Hopefully, some of them have written language, so there's a source of records that we can go back to if we think about the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages of our European culture, for example. There's some work that's available that tells us about the thing. What is left behind, the archaeology part of it, in terms of tools and equipment and jewelry, evidence of clothing, any sort of artwork that was done. Those things tell us a lot about the society, and from it we can start to infer how their societies develop leadership. So we would have to do that, or a part of leadership looks at observing what's taking place in societies and working it out. So let's think about 10,000, 20,000 years from today. If something happened and we got all killed off this week, what would a new generation of individuals 20,000 years from now find that would give them evidence of us? And what would they find? What tools do you think they would collect in our our current set of tools that they're going to find? What do you think they will find evidence wise?
So physical anthropology.
Yeah, but what physical? What tools would they find? Remember, like
Like bone,
sorry,
like
say it.
bones and stuff.
Well, bones would be our physical anthropology. That'll be this, the bones part. What I'm talking about is like what tools would they find? What evidence of linguistics and language and record keeping would they find?
Books.
Hopefully some books, but the vast majority of our stuff now they're gonna find a lot of these. They're gonna find people like this all over the place. Their bones surrounding some sort of device of this nature. Why? It's become the focal point of our tools, not so? Because all this stuff that we are utilizing, all this technology that surrounds us, is practically the only real difference that we have from the caveman days. Think about it from that sense. Everything that we do is contained in bits and bytes and little pieces of machine language all over the place. Making sense? Yes. I'm just saying, for instance, I don't. I'm not saying we are going to die sometime this week. All right. Another framework through which we look at history is, look at leadership is through history. And primarily what we're looking at here is people who rose to significant um, levels in our society due to some sort of major movement that was taking place in the world or in the societies that we're engaged in or looking at. So, how many of you all recognize these gentlemen? Anybody?
Hitler.
All right. Who's Hitler? Which one's Hitler?
The one with the mustache.
Yeah, that helps. Well, there are two guys with mustaches there, by the way.
The odd looking
The third one.
mustache.
The third one.
The third guy. So this guy here. All right. So who's the guy to his left? Well, your right. This guy here in the uniform.
Stalin.
Uh-huh. That makes these two gentlemen whom?
Winston Churchill.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember
Roosevelt.
I know the one on the very left is a former president of America.
Right. Roosevelt. Sounds familiar? Roosevelt?
Yeah.
Right. So we have a highway named after these two guys, right?
Yeah.
The Churchill Roosevelt Highway. All right. So what are these guys famous for? What event brought them to the forefront in an international setting? Anybody remembers what this day about?
War.
Which war?
I would say more than one actually.
Well, it was one particular war, actually.
World War One.
No, World War Two.
Okay.
World War Two. World War One. He was a soldier in World War One. Most of these guys were young men back in that day. All right. Okay. So again, the concept here is that these four gentlemen rose to prominence because of an event, historically speaking, and they became the focal point around which a lot of history evolved. All right. So this is one way in which you could look at that. What about this gentleman here? Anybody familiar with him? No.
Um,
Martin Luther King.
Dr. Martin Luther King, yes. And what movement is he associated with?
I have a dream.
Yeah, but that's not the movement. That's one of his famous statements. Caleb, I see your mic open.
I'm not sure what the movement names to. I know he did.
Okay, could barely hear you. Very soft.
I say I don't really know what the movement say.
If there's
So
not a
was it?
name,
So was it to get rid of segregation?
among other things, it was actually referred to as the civil rights
Yeah,
movement.
civil rights movement.
Right? Okay. So he was one of the leaders during this period of time that rose in the United States, but also had an international impact through members that were influenced by him, like this gentleman. Anybody knows him? Nobody knows him. Okay. This guy is a guy called Kwame Ture. Anybody knows that name,
Yes, sir.
right? Do you know another name for Kwame Ture? No? All right, so I'm going to give you all some homework about Kwame Ture. His other name is, go ahead, Nikisha.
No, no, no. Sir, I do not know another name for commissary.
You don't know Kwame Ture's name. Stokely Carmichael. That's his actual name. His initial name was Stokely Carmichael. And then when he became involved in the civil rights movement in the United States, um, he changed his name to Kwame Ture. What is significant? Why did I pick him? Why do you think I picked him?
Because he is Trinidadian born.
Correct.
Trinidad.
Yes, and he was pivotal in United States in the Black Panther movement, if you're familiar with that, and he actually helped to influence the 1970s revolution here in Trinidad. So you see this connectivity from a student attending school in the United States as a black man being influenced by people like Martin Luther King, Martin X, and others to bring the concept of civil rights movements into the Caribbean region, specifically because alongside him were people like Marcus Garvey, Buzz Butler, all those guys who came into to the Caribbean environment, which was also under a form of imperialism, white imperialism that they referred to, and brought a movement and an awareness of Black Power movement and the need for getting our society sorted out in terms of the positioning of young black men and young black women in their societies that they came from. That led to some violent repercussions in some countries, like Trinidad. We had some relative violence for that period. Um, and but it is part of the growth process. Now, the homework I'm going to give you about this gentleman is to go find. And I'm not saying you're going to have to find this via legal means, but whatever means you can. See if you can find a film called The Black Klansman and have a look at it because the Kwame Ture is featured in that film. Anybody's familiar with that film, The Black Klansman? Ever heard of that film before? I think it was about 5 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. Nobody knows? You all could Google those things, make sure I'm not lying and telling you to do things you don't want to do. You have some whole pile of films you could look at with this, and even Martin Luther King. You could look at that movie. You have Malcolm X. You can look at all those films are really important that you could look at. That brings us to this photo here. Each one of these leaders in their time has had negative or positive influence on the societies that they acted in or influenced. How many of these people do you recognize? How many people? Well, we talked about Hitler already. We talked about Stalin. We talked about Roosevelt. We talked about Winston Churchill. We talked about Martin Luther King. I don't have Kwame Ture here, but can you see other people you recognize?
Marilyn Monroe.
Right? What?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Right. Good.
Elvis.
Sorry, Elvis.
Elvis.
All right, Elvis Presley.
Fidel
Elvis.
Castro.
Yes.
Fidel Castro. Uh huh.
Is that Mother Teresa?
Yes.
Nelson Mandela.
Good. Nelson Mandela. Do you know the guy next to Nelson Mandela?
Um, no.
Okay. They are together because they are related. So
Okay.
not right. So this is one of the Cecil Roach. He was important with the situation with apartheid in South Africa.
Mhm.
All right. So he represented that stuff. Anybody knows this lady here?
I'm trying to remember her name. It really. What's her name? I can't remember.
Margaret Thatcher.
Right.
All
Yes.
right. First female president
Female
of
president.
the UK. Yeah. All right. But each one of these individuals, in one way or another, had a long lasting influence on the countries that they were from, as well as the world in general. Because the impact kind of spread beyond themselves. So we think about this guy here in the space suit. Anybody knows who that is? Buzz Armstrong, first guy to walk on the moon, right? So, what do you think about when we think about some of these individuals? Some of it is positive, some is negative, like Cecil Rhodes here. Um, so, based upon why is Reagan next to Fidel Castro? Because two of them clashed a lot during that period. You know, this guy with the mouse on his table, who's that? Walt
Walt
Disney.
Disney.
Yeah. So we know about him and animation and the development of animation films and stuff like that, especially the American version. Who are these four gentlemen here
The
next to Elvis?
Beatles.
The Beatles. And why they kind of couch together is because collectively they had some of the most important influences on the world around us in terms of music and trends and fashion and that type. Same thing with Marilyn Monroe. Now this gentleman in between here is kind of a misnomer. Anybody? It's a very old photo, so it's somebody from far back. Anybody? No?
So does Shakespeare?
Sorry?
I know I could be wrong, yeah, but is that Shakespeare?
No, no, no. Shakespeare wouldn't look like
Oh,
that. This is the
that's
guy.
that
Yeah,
little.
this is the guy who assassinated Lincoln. Who?
Oh, sorry.
Right?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. I know. I was wondering why his picture was there, but I'll check it back and see. All right. So you have a lot of these guys here, for example. These two are the premiers of Russia or the Soviet Union, with Gorbachev probably being the last one, and Khrushchev being one of the most well known for his veracity of trying to say that the Soviet Union will crush everybody around them. But Mr. Khrushchev kind of hosted the movement of the Soviet Union out of communism and into the burgeoning democracy that they've become today, or the au- autocratic sort of in things. So again, a number of people, different circumstances, different situations brought them to the fore, and they then became influential leaders in their own thing. So we have something now called social media influencers. Anybody, you all will be more familiar with than with me. Than sorry, you all will be more familiar with these social media leaders than I would, given that I'm either. But can you all think of any social media influencers that you are familiar with that maybe we could take a look at? Anybody? Nobody? You all don't look at social. No, Nova?
Certified Samsung.
Say that again. Who?
Certified Samsung.
Who did that? Not quite making out what you're saying.
So she said certified Samsung, a local influencer.
Certified Samson. Okay. Is that guy with Ezekiel? Or
Yes, sir.
or
That's himself.
that's him?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. My girlfriend likes him a lot. I just find him annoying. But he's funny. I
I
understand.
agree with you.
The voice is annoying, but I understand. But why there's the attraction for it? Because you're just waiting for him to get a cutter. It's always satisfying when somebody starts to beat him. Oh Lord. All right, thanks a lot. That's interesting. I guess there are a few others that we could probably look for, but right now I guess he's hot, so to speak. All right, so let's look at another framework, and this is the last framework we're going to be looking at is a lot of what we're going to look at in the future in terms of leadership is going to be through the lens of psychology and sociology. Of course, psychology looks at the individual, sociology looks at us as groups. And with that in mind, we're going to focus a lot on the activities and work and contributions of these three gentlemen: Sigmund Freud and his work in psychology and psychiatry, Karl Marx with his work in not necessarily in communism, but Karl Marx in a lot of his work in sociology and the development of understanding large societies, and B.F. Skinner, who did a lot of work and writing in adult education and the philosophies that were developed and techniques that were developed to further adult education and a combination of those things. So when we start to look at the leadership studies, we're going to be looking at all of these different theories in the context of how they arose and how they were influenced. So that we're going to be tackling that in our next chapter that we're going to be dealing with. So I want to ask a question at this point in time and take a little break because we have a few more slides to go through afterwards, but I want to take a little stretch, 10 minutes or so. Think about, and I want some answers when I come back or when we come back. Think about how your field of study approaches leadership and how you think about it at this point in time. All right, so let's take a 10 minute. I'm not going to stop the recording, but we're just going to deal with it here and leave the break inside the thing. Think about it for 10 minutes. We'll be back at that time. That'll be okay with everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yep, okay, good.
So
All right, guys, welcome back. Is there anybody there? All
Yes, sir.
right. So, Alicia, you tell me, what field are you in? What field are you studying?
Radiography.
Oh, good, fantastic. How do people achieve or get into leadership roles in radiography?
I would say is a lot of adaptability because from clinicals, I observe like there's usually one radiographer in the room, and then there will be the attendants to bring in that patient and the nurses and so on. But
Hmm.
nobody knows what's actually going on when it comes to the imaging. So the radiographer has to take the point there and tell everybody what to do accordingly because obviously we're not
Right.
trained
But
to do the lifting, etc.
right. So that's in the situation of the actual service itself in terms of getting the patient ready to get the appropriate pictures, right? But what I'm talking about is in the organization. How does somebody become a head of a radiology department, as far as you're
I
aware?
guess that is based on your training and certification, right?
Some of it, yes, but experience doesn't count. Years of service.
Yes, but nowadays i- in the healthcare sector, they want to see more paper than experience.
Really?
So,
Okay. Um, are you seeing a lot of young people in head of departments and running the radiology center and that type of stuff?
no, you make a
Right.
good point.
Yes, so it is still going to be a combination of qualifications, yes, but years of service as well is also going to play an important role. That actually happens in the vast majority of organizations for the simple reason that experiential learning and learning through what you've done in the past is still a very important and valid form of qualification or qualifying circumstance um, that that plays a role in it. But more importantly, now we find ourselves to be able to even begin to approach positions of leadership, you have to be fully certified. Correct? Yep.
Yes, sir.
That was Jonathan. Uh, who was that? That was Brooks. Okay. All right. So, well, let's leave that for now and continue on with our presentation so that we can look at what we're talking about here. So in this part here, the framework that we are going to be looking at in this text and in this course is going to be the relational leadership model. And the relational leadership model we spoke about before is going to focus our attention on the nature of the relationship that exists between leaders and followers. It is going to be based upon a lot of psychological and educational work that was done in the past and which is going to be applied to the techniques to develop your learning skills in this particular area. It's going to require one learning about yourself. So if we look at the presentations that are coming up, you'd you see the first presentation that students are going to be teaching will be the first chapter here, chapter 4, understanding self. That'll be related to this outcome here. Self-awareness in the context of others. That's another presentation that we're going to be looking at here. Understanding others, chapter 5. Um, we're going to be looking at understanding your personal values, beliefs, and commitments. That is going to be related to integrity and moral purpose, as you can see here, chapter 6. And we're also going to be looking at your ability to work in groups. So we understand that in a lot of our basic preparation for leadership, we have to start with self. We have to start understanding who we are, who how people think about us, because there's usually a disconnect between what we see ourselves as and how others see you, and you need to be aware of how others see you. That's going to be a very important element that you have to pay attention to, and we need to understand what our core beliefs and values are, because that's going to be important in determining future behavior. In that, in doing so, we have to develop that sense of self-awareness that we talked about. We have to be able to effectively listen to other people. We have to engage in collaborative exercises. That collaboration requires that we exercise compromise, because we can't get things our own way, and we have to be constantly practicing these things all the time. Of these five elements here, one of the most difficult to engage in is effective listening. So I want to ask a question. Miss Murray, what do you think effective listening means? If not Miss Murray, Miss King, Brianna?
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say just um hearing someone out completely before you make a point or something like that. I really
Oh,
don't know how to express it.
all right, let's think. Okay, so if you need to listen to somebody completely, what are some of the things you need to do as an individual to prepare yourself to effectively listen to somebody else?
Can you repeat the question?
What are some of the things you need to do to prepare yourself to effectively listen to somebody else?
Um, Calm your mind so you don't have any other roaming thoughts, so you don't like,
Focus, then. That's what you're talking about.
yeah,
Focus.
focus.
All right. Physically, what would you do in order to assist your focus?
Um,
Would you not look at them?
oh, yeah,
Right. Maintain eye contact. Yeah. It's important. Why? Because we have to also look for nonverbal cues, correct?
yes.
What they do with themselves, how they behave when they say certain things. But there is a key thing that has to happen internally in us. And I'm hoping that you can recognize it. And if you can't, or if you can't say it because it may not become to mind, I hope other people can contribute. What do you think? It's a critical thing that we have to do in ourselves to effectively listen to somebody else. It's not something physical to do, but it's something mentally we have to do. And it's probably the most challenging part. Brianna, any thought?
I don't know.
You're not sure? Anybody else thinks they have an idea of what I'm talking about?
So would it be like
Understand.
avoid making any sort of judgmental um
Nail
decision?
on the head. Yes. Excellent. All right, Ramona, that is exactly it. We have to suspend our own judgment to listen to somebody else. Now, I saw somebody else had opened their microphone. Who was that?
That was the question. So
Yes, Mr. Singh. Yeah, tell me. What were
I
you going to
wanted
say?
to say understanding, but the other person gave a much better response.
Right. Because for us to understand somebody else, Kristen, we actually have, is it Kristen or Christian?
Question,
Christian.
so
Christian. Right. Sorry, I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry about that.
those
Uh, all right. So, Mr. Singh, in order for us to really understand somebody, because that's the objective, huh? Our objective is to understand the thoughts and ideas and the feelings of the other individual. For us to effectively do that, we have to suspend our judgment of what they're talking about. It's easy when we're talking about things that we like, or we have a commonality, but it becomes difficult and very challenging when somebody is talking to you about something you are diametrically opposed to. So anything you have a strong emotional um, idea or connection to, or adherence to, will become problematic for you to listen to. Now, the question is, how do we go about practicing effective listening? Well, what I can tell you to do, a couple of little techniques that I've taught students over the years. One, listen to music you don't like. It has to be music that is absolutely disgusting to you. That's one thing. Two, listen to talk shows or audio shows or audio podcasts or stuff like that, or even radio shows or television shows in which people are talking about things you hate, you have an absolute disgust for. Listen to them. But what you're trying to do when you're listening to those audio shows or podcasts is to understand the point that the person is trying to make and put into practice suspension of self judgment. That is the challenge that I'm giving to you guys. Okay? That's one of the things you're going to have to do because it is very difficult. It's all well and good when we are on the same page, meaning that we all feel similarly about the issue that we're talking about. But you could see this in conversations that are popularized on well, I see a lot of YouTube shorts on people, talking and other people just not listening and just, throwing them sideways and whatnot. This has to do with things like transgender issues, you have abortion issues, you have various leadership decisions that are made left and right. We have it in this country as well. Those who are UNC and those who are PNM. Anytime you come across people who are from an opposing point of view or an opposing value system, we stop listening. And that is a dangerous thing as a leader, not to listen to what's happening from the other side. Because regardless of how badly or how much you hate or disgusted by what that person represents or what that person is saying, it doesn't mean that what they have to say has no value. And that's what we have to do. I'm not saying you have to agree with somebody's position or point of view, but you must effectively try to understand why that person or individual believes what they do or does what they do. You need to understand why that has happened over time. And that is the challenge that you're going to face as a leader when you get into situations where, especially where your organization becomes very large, and you start to encounter other people with varying and differing points of view about things. You don't have to agree with them, but you must understand why they have that position, and that's going to be a challenge moving forward. Going forward. Some foundation principles of leadership that we have to pay attention to. One, it concerns us all. Now, I know at younger ages, teenagers and early 20s, we don't look at leadership as being something that's important. That's other people thing, especially when you start to see people or you hear stories in relation to the government and activities coming from there. We don't see it as being important. But the reality is that decisions made at those levels impact us directly, and therefore we should be paying attention to what's happening. Because by the time you get to the point where you are actually paying attention, you have no influence over what's being done or what's been said. Think about laws that are passed in and around the country or in different parts of the world that suddenly something that you used to do all your life has now become an illegal activity. Think about it from that perspective. We must understand, just like it concerns us all and people respond to it differently, we need to understand that leadership is seen and valued differently by all. So as a leader, we need to understand that some of the things that we see as being critical or important, it is not going to be looked at or valued by the other people around us in the same manner. Understand that leadership has to be a flexible, dynamic activity, and it cannot be that there's one methodology that you utilize for leadership. There has to be flexibility, which leads us to the second thing. There are different types of leadership techniques that you can use for different types of settings, and we're going to see that a little bit. And the most important element is that leadership is a skill that can be developed and learned. It is not something that is genetic to anybody. Regardless of what the theories are going to say, um, or some theories come up with and say there's a set of people that have particular genetic markers that set them up as leaders. That's not actually true. There's no scientific evidence to prove such. And you all are going to debate that topic in the debate activities. It's one of the topics available for debate, I should say. Leaders are born, not made. So that's something you want to talk about as well. Further elements of the thing that we need to be looking at is to be able to develop the highest ethical standards that govern our behavior. And in order to do that, we are talking about critical thinking, credibility, authenticity, integrity, and ethical conduct. Now, one of the most important ones here is the first one, which is critical thinking. The problem with critical thinking, however, is that a lot of us have been, our critical thinking has not been developed, especially in our education system, because questioning authority has been something that has been squashed a lot. So a lot of, well, the vast majority of our education system stamps that out early because they don't want us to be disruptive in the classroom because teachers don't have a lot of time and they have all this work to do. And if you ask too much questions, you're going to keep back the rest of the class. So that's the kind of nonsense that you hear. So critical thinking is something you're going to have to relearn, and you're going to have to put into to practice. Critical thinking meaning looking at things from various positions, points of views, evaluating that, not utilizing emotional responses, but utilizing objective responses, objective research, and then coming to some sort of logical conclusion or logical point of view or position based upon the analysis of the data available. Understanding too that if more data becomes available in the future, it can change your position on a particular topic or point of view or decision that you've made because of this new information that feeds into the decision making possibility. Now, that therefore impacts upon your credibility. Your credibility is the way in which people see you as believable. And you don't hear this statement if you say run, stand up, and if you say stand up, run. That is your credibility. It's affected by how honest you're going to be. That's your authenticity. That what you say is actually the truth and not something that you're pretending to be. That therefore impacts upon your integrity, and all of those sit upon your ethical behavior, because it must be something that you actually believe in, that you actually hold and value. So all of these are linked to each other across the board. So you can't have one without the other. They all build on each other across the board. So these are things you have to pay attention to because these are foundation concepts that sit at the base of your leadership potential. All right. So the process of going through to develop this is to start with the first part of the process, knowing. So we spoke about this. You must understand who you are as a person. You must also understand how change takes place both in yourself and other people, and why other people see things differently to you. All right. So with that being said, let's look at this. Um, Ali Didier, Kalisa, Kalissa. Have I said that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Kalissa.
Calissa.
All right, Kalissa. What do you see here in this photo?
So I see a woman looking in a mirror, but I also see like a skull.
Uh huh. Okay.
But like
Describe.
she's sitting on a chair, and it looks like probably like a vanity,
Table. Yeah. Okay.
and it has some stuff
On it.
on
That
there. Yeah,
that
but the
looks like
stuff on it also looking like teeth on the
Good.
skull.
Good. Good. Now, everybody would agree with that. You could just put your hands up or your thumbs up, as the case might be, if you agree with Kalissa. Yep, I'm seeing hands up. All right, good, good, good. Fantastic. Okay, so let's look at this one here. Kalissa, let's go back to this. You start. Tell me, what do you see?
Um, hmm, a lady with some hair and some kind of headpiece,
Uh-huh.
but it looking like um,
Which
I don't
direction
know
is
if
she?
it looking like water or if it looking like some
A coat?
breeze blowing or something,
Where,
but
which
it looking like
is it a young
she
woman
has
or
some
old woman?
um hmm, I don't know oil.
Is she looking down or is she looking back? What direction is she looking?
She looking I think she looking straight ahead, like forward.
Uh-huh. She has a long chin or she has a big nose. What does she have?
Um, hmm, I don't know.
Mm. All right. Mr. Singh, are you seeing anything different to Kalissa?
Well, um, all I see is a old, nice lady, a long chin, big nose. Her eyes look like it covered up by something.
This stuff here,
Uh,
this is like a fringe of hair, but these are eyes, hair, and hair. Yeah,
oh, wait. Okay, I never seen that.
you seen that? Okay.
Wait, so okay, so assuming that back piece is like some um
Like a,
cosmetic, like a armor piece or something like that.
you mean this stuff here?
Well, you see the front is her hair, but her back look like hair too soon.
This right? This hair is like a hair tie.
Oh, is that hair tie? Okay,
Yeah,
so
like a
animal
scarf
hair.
over her head. Yeah,
Oh,
and she's kind
okay.
of looking down.
Yeah, her head slightly tilted, but like she looking straight, right?
Look, yeah, she's looking straight ahead, but she's looking downwards. Her head is kind of like down
Yeah,
like this, like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Kalissa, is
And
that what you saw?
Say as I answer.
Is that what you're seeing on a kind of elderly looking
Yeah,
lady
I
looking down?
find down. I don't know. I find she looking like
Well,
she
she's
to the
looking in,
side.
looking, looking to the side. Okay.
Well, she to the side and looking straight ahead, like forward.
Oh,
I don't
straight,
see
like
him down.
looking more to the corner of the photo, right? Like moving, looking over
Yeah,
here. All right. Okay. All right. Cool.
yeah,
All right. Anybody
yeah.
seeing
It looked
anything?
like she wearing a furry coat for you.
Correct. Yes. So all of this looks like a coat. Anybody else seen what they're seeing? Hands up. Or anybody seeing something that is different?
Yes, sir.
What are you seeing, Ramona?
So, if you look at it at a different angle,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually, like the woman was actually making like the face of someone else who is actually looking to the side, and the
Mm-hmm.
whole muff of hair that would be to the woman's front of her head is actually like a hairstyle with
Right. So what you're talking about, like this piece here and this element here is a
yeah,
woman looking over her shoulder, right? So you're getting a profile. So this would be
yes,
her eyes, this would be her
yes,
chin, this would be her
yes,
ears, and this would be like a choker that she has, or you know those things you wear
yes,
in your neck, kind of thing.
yes,
And all of this
yes,
would be like a hair tie, well like a feather, and all of this would be like a coat. All of this is her neck. Everybody seen
yes.
that? Anybody else seen that?
So I know seen it. So.
Good,
It
good,
took
good.
my
Yeah,
wife
that's what
back
I saw
not to see
too.
it.
I now see it too.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Um, in terms of in this photo, you should actually be seeing two people. The older woman looking down, almost like her chin is in her chest, almost looking downwards. That'll be this area here. This is her chin. This is her mouth. This is her nose. These are her eyes. This is the front of hair that's sticking out under her hair tie, and this is the dark stuff here is her coat. Simultaneously, you have a young lady looking over her shoulder, looking almost like looking back. This is this is the girl's chin here. All of this. This is the younger girl's eyes. Well, one of the so not the eyes, the ears. This is her eye over here. This is sort of like a those little neck things you wear, and this is off. So you have two basic um, two pictures built into one. There are lots of photos like this online that you could find that have that sort of perception bend. Everybody is seeing the two elements. This is kind of important. If you don't see it, put your hand up. If you don't see the two women in this picture, you're not seeing it, Nova.
No, sir, I only seen like the young lady
Uh
with the
huh.
long pony and the coat. I'm not seeing anybody else.
All right. Brianna, you also only seeing the young lady or you seeing the old lady? Which one are you seeing?
I'm seeing the young lady.
All right. So for those of you who are not seeing the older woman, I want you to follow this exercise with me. Close your eyes for about a couple seconds. Listen to me and follow the instruction. Close your eyes. Now open your eyes and listen to what I say to you. There's an old lady who's looking down. She looks a bit sad. This is her chin. This is her mouth. This is her large nose. This is one of her eyes. This is the other eyelash you can see just over her large nose. This is the frond of hair that she has poking out over her on her the top of her head. This is the scarf that she's covering her head with. This is a feather that is coming out of the scarf. The dark area here is a coat that she's wearing on her shoulders. This is her chin. This is her mouth. This is her nose. This and this are her eyes looking downwards. This is the bit of hair sticking out from the hair scarf that she's wearing. This is a feather sticking out from it. You seeing it now?
Yes, sir.
You seeing it
Yes, sir.
now?
It took a few minutes to see it.
Right. So, but you have to stop looking at the young woman. So whichever you see first. Now, technically, they put this up online and say, you know, if you depending on what you see, it tells you something about your personality. I'm not too sure about that. This has to do with tricks of the eye. You really have to really pay attention to perception with this. But this is the important aspect of this exercise. The exercise is that if at first we don't see another person's point of view, we may have to work a little harder to see that person's point of view. But a lot of times, it's really going to be a matter of position, of where we are in terms of physical position or mental positions. Because look at this thing here. These persons are right. Both persons are correct. But they're correct only because of where they stand. If one person were to walk across to the other one, they would see it from their position. And that's an important exercise that we have to understand. In order to understand how other people see things, we have to use that old adage, we have to walk a mile in their shoe to really and truly appreciate somebody else's position or point of view in life. That makes sense? That's the point of this exercise. Because both, if we think about it from the perspective of both individuals, they're both correct. But they're only going to be correct if they stay in the position that they are. If we don't make an attempt to see the other person's position by walking across to them and looking at the object from their perception or their point of view, we will never solve this problem. And unfortunately, in life, a lot of arguments emerge because of this, because we simply don't have the strength or we're not willing to try to see something from other people's positions. That makes sense? So, again, remember we said this is the knowing element. We must know who we are, how change takes place both in ourselves, primarily in ourselves, that's where we have to focus our attention, and why people see things differently than the way we do. All right? The next aspect of the three principles is the being part. That is, we must be ethical, we must be principled, open, caring, and inclusive. Now, that's a really critical thing because in order for us to effectively work with people, we have to be open to working with them. The problem that comes up with this element is that if we are working with people who are similar to us, both in terms of age, qualifications, and influence and past life, that's all well and good. But from the time we start to become involved with people who come from a different walk of life to us, who come with different influences, different cultural backgrounds, even different languages, we begin to have problems. And those problems can only be surmounted if we have a caring, open approach to somebody. That is something we're going to have to put into practice because the only way we can work well with each other is that we have to genuinely care about the individuals that we are working with. All right? So this quotation from Richard Branson, for example, for those of you who may know him, he's the owner and creator of Virgin Airlines and Virgin Records. All right. Having a personality of caring about people is important. You can't be a good leader unless you genuinely like people or generally like people. That's how you bring out the best in them. People are not going to work hard for somebody or work hard with somebody if they don't care about you. It makes sense to think about that from that perspective here. Third element in the developmental process, the doing part. You must act in a socially responsible manner, consistently and congruently as a participant in a community and on your commitments and passions. So, what is this saying? This is talking about behaving in a particular way, in a socially responsible manner, um, and being consistent and congruent in that behavior. Now, what does that mean? Consistently and congruently refers to place and time. So every time a situation comes up, our response should be the same. And it must be consistent regardless of what environment we find ourselves in. If something happens at home, our reaction should be the same as what how we would react when we are at work. All right? We can't have one set of different value structures for home and for work and for private. You understand? We have to be consistently across the board because eventually, what ends up happening, and when you see this in movies all the time, you have a person who in private they behave one way and then in public they behave another way, or they portray themselves to be another way. Eventually, that dichotomy of behavioral standards begins to bleed into into each other's worlds, and you find that creates problems for individuals, especially those who are painting themselves in a position that they want to put themselves above other people. This is something that happens a lot with um, political people, people in political positions, and you find it also. I've seen this happening now a lot with people who are famous in movies and stuff like that, as well as social influencers. I see that happening now as well because in on their social feed they behave in one way. They propose different types of activities, and then privately they're doing something absolutely different. Now, social responsibility is not a new concept. You've probably come across this before. This is this is a principle of being more about more focused on being responsible to our society by giving back to the society. You find this happens a lot with firms that are perceived in our society as being more of a taker from the world, or is dependent upon negative aspects of our lives. So, for example, insurance companies. Insurance companies or insurance is based upon the certainty of death and the assurance that you can provide for those people who survive you is what their principal concept or instrument is based on. So when you get into a position of where you start to work, one of the things I would tell you is start up some sort of retirement fund and start up some sort of insurance coverage, especially if you have a family or you intend to get married. The earlier you start it up, the cheaper it is to actually do it. All right. The whole point about it is that the concept or the whole industry is based upon that principle of certainty of mortality. Other organizations such as oil companies, for example, or quarrying companies that is destructive to environment, usually have to do things to give back to the society that they're actually hurting. So this is a part of social responsibility that they're talking about. From an individual point of view, however, we don't necessarily have to be doing things or working in an organization that is negative in nature, and therefore we have to put forward this social responsibility activities. But what we need to be aware of is that organizations that earn money or make profits should also be looking at making sure that we share that profit with other folks. Now, you see that happening in small companies in particular. Um, Successful groceries in some areas, they will do like they'll have a children's party for Christmas time and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you all have that happening in your communities. I know that we had a guy here in my neighborhood. Every Christmas comes around, he would always feed the children in the neighborhood and stuff like that. I know at one point in time, my mom used to do that home here as well. Um, Christmas time, she would give out little gifts and have a little Christmas party for the children in the neighborhood, that type of stuff. So you have that happening in various organizations around the place. At some point in time, Costat used to do that too. When I worked in the Sandy Grande campus, for a couple of Christmases, we used to do this sort of toy drive, and we also did a drive for um, the more what else we doing? Needy people in society in the community right around the college. You know, we do a food drive for them. We do a. I see the college does that still in terms of for children going back to school. We kind of um, put book bags together for children who come from families that are in need, and we get their textbooks together, we get their school supplies and whatnot. How many of you all get involved with things like that? That maybe through your church or through your past schools and stuff like that. Any of you all? Nobody?
Me, sir.
Talk about it. What is it me that you do?
You talking about like the experience in general,
Yeah,
or
general. No, but what do you all do in that organization? First off, what organization is it? Without giving a
I
name.
don't know if you know Sewa Titi.
Sarah what?
Sewa Titi with the Diwali Nagar.
Say what? No, I'm not familiar with that. That an acronym, but I think I'm familiar with it. All right. Tell us about what the exercise that you all get involved in.
So basically, a lot of volunteers come together and we have meetings based on what the village needs, and everybody would come with canned food, rice,
Dry goods.
perishables, yeah,
Yeah.
and we would like stack them up in according to what they are and pass around with a bag and fill them accordingly. And like on the weekends, drive to those villages and hand them out. Also for like the flood victims,
Uh-huh.
we do those with disinfectant and food, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you all kind of come to the aid of impoverished societies. I saw somebody else's hand had gone up, um, but I didn't talk to them yet. I think who was that?
That was me, sir.
Uh huh. Okay, Anastasia.
Um, yeah, recently, I made a list within my church, and I wanted to like do like a food drive for like the homeless, and
Uh huh.
I have the church I donate like an item towards whatever meal we plan, and like we would have picked a date and we went out like to a certain area where we know it was populated with like homeless people and stuff, and just share the food towards them.
All right, feeding the homeless. Okay, I've done that too myself actually. I used to be in a band, and every year we used to do that. Sometimes for Christmas Day we'd go out, but that happens a lot. Christmas you get a lot of people doing that kind of feeding and stuff like that. But that's those are good things. Anybody else gets involved in any sort of socially responsible activities through organizations, groups, and whatnot? It's usually best done through groups, but individuals can get involved with that too. You don't have to support an entire society. You can kind of help one individual who's in need. No, nobody, or at least nobody's willing to share. All right, let's move along then. All right, so we have. Oh, come on. All right. Um, so the first thing, even though we just went through those three steps of knowing, being, doing, we can't just say that leadership development is just a step by step process. It's not going to be that easy, because the things that we're asking you to do here, first of all, take time to develop, and they're going to take a lot of effort to be able to get into. Yes, it might look like a step-by-step issue, but it's going to be something that you're going to be constantly engaged in a never-ending process. In fact, I don't see it as circular, I see it more as a spiral. You have to constantly keep on going through these processes of learning and relearning and reevaluating yourself, knowing, being, doing, knowing, being, doing. Because every time we go through the cycle, we should learn some more. So that's why I say it's more of a spiral, and it should be an upward spiral, meaning that every time we go through the process, we learn something, add it to our arsenal of understanding and beliefs, and more importantly, perception, and cycle outwards. And as we move that way, we are able to impact upon more people, help more people, based upon what we're able to do in terms of, of that development as a leader. Okay, so we want to talk about some paradigms here. A paradigm is simply a way in which we look at situations or group of solutions. So we know this paradigm of hard work. We've gotten this drilled into us since primary school. If you want to do good, you have to work hard, right? So the concept of working hard to solve our problems, the model says this is too simplistic. Instead of working harder, we need to work smarter. So, what do we mean when we say smarter? We say collectively, reflectively, and spiritually. So, collectively smarter means we recognize the fact that a group of us working on a problem is better than one person working on a problem. Why is that? That's because when you have more than one person working on a problem, you bring to bear the experience of all of those individuals. That might account for maybe 50 to 100 years worth of experience with a lot of other positions, perspectives, points of views, training, and experiences, all bringing to bear on the same problem. One person, yourself, is only going to bring your own perspective, your own training, and your own experiences. When you include more people, we collectively work together. That's why it's so important for us to work in groups, because the groups are more powerful than the individual. All right? So that's what when we say collectively smarter. Never, if possible, attack a problem by yourself. Attack a problem with a group of individuals. That is a challenge, though, because a lot of us don't like to work with groups because we may lack the skills to be able to do so. All right. The other method of working smarter is reflectively smarter. That is taking time to look at what took place in the past, understand what worked, what didn't work, making meaning out of it, and using that to understand how to proceed in the future. The problem with being reflectively smarter is the speed at which life runs. Now, this is something that I try to put into practice when I teach, because as I get to the end of a semester, I like to reflect on what took place in the previous semester and make adjustments and moving forward to make positive changes and to kind of improve things. But because of the speed in which we transition from one semester into another, it's rather difficult to actually put aside the time to do the analysis that's necessary. And I know some of you all also suffer from this as well. I mean, those of you who are into your second year, in particular, second and third year, you would have experienced this inability to, really absorb what took place and in the previous semester before the next semester is upon you, because life just runs at a really fast rate, especially if you are working as well as attending school. Anybody agrees with that? Anybody could see what I'm talking about there, the difficulty of being reflectively smarter? Hands, put your hands up if you're yes or no. No, nobody has problems reflecting on your past behavior to make changes in your current behavior.
Yeah, so sometimes.
Okay, only honest person so far, I think. All right, so let's move on. So the next one is spiritually smarter. And this has nothing to do with your religion or your faith structure. This actually has to do with understanding your values. You need to be aware of what are your core values, or your core beliefs, because those are the values that when things go wrong, those are the values that are going to be most present in your behavior. When the world falls apart, those things, that behavior, that those core beliefs are what is going to guide your reaction and your behavior. So if your reaction is to hit out, lash people, and hurt others, then at your core, that is what is driving you. Spiritually smarter means you need to be aware that those are your belief structures. And if you don't quite want that to be your core values, then you need to work at making sure those values get superseded by something that you're willing to show others. All right? Oftentimes, if you really want to see what's at the core of somebody, observe them when things go wrong. What do they do? Do they lash out at other people and hurt them? Do they, you know, I mean, you expect some of that, especially with grief in particular, is one of the areas that you could see this happening. Pay attention to yourself. Forget about other people. Pay attention to what you do when the world falls apart around you. I'm not saying that it will, but when it does fall apart around you, it's something that you want to pay attention to how you react, because that is going to be one of the key things that is going to help to tell you what is your core value. All right, something that is important for you to pay attention to. So we talked about paradigms before. So we talked about the paradigm of hard work. So paradigms are really patterns of looking at things and in order to make sense of them. So current paradigms in leadership. So we're going to kind of race through this a little bit. Um, think about a paradigm as, you know, as a way, we talked about that, a way of looking at things. In leadership, the problem we seem to be having is that um, we continually keep on generating leaders that don't seem to be able to have the ability to provide solutions for us. Um, and it means that something is wrong with the way in which decisions are made in the country. We could think about this in the context of crime, for example. We keep on doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So that means we have to begin to really change the way in which we are observing these things. So paradigm shift that is suggested in the text here. Leadership is not about the leader, but it's about the people who follow them, the followership. And if you really think about this, most times when we think about leaders, the focus is always on leaders themselves. Leadership is not about the leader, it's about the process that you've used to involve your followership. So the text or the model that we're looking at here looks at fellowship or followership, I should say, is really leadership in action among people. And it makes sense because if you're a leader and you have no followers or you can't engage your followership, you're not going to achieve anything. All right? That makes sense? So leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as a process that involves followership. So we have to understand that our shift in thinking now. If we understand that successful leaders have more to do with their relationship with the followers, then this starts to point us into a different set of concepts and ideas that we need to involve ourselves in. So analyzing follower types. So I want you all to think about this in the context of a group work. So you get put into a group. Who are you? So we look at analyzing you and the other members in terms of their ability to work with each other, that's their relationship initiative, and their performance initiative, the willingness and ability to actually do the research and do the analysis for the work. So we have these two variables that we're going to be looking at. Where would you position yourself? Are you going to be a partner? Somebody whose performance initiative is high as well as their ability to communicate and work with others is also high. Now, if you're the leader of this particular group, a partner is a very powerful person, but is likely to challenge you a lot. simply because they will tend to be as good as you are because you're supposed to be up in that quadrant as well. However, think about this. In some groups, you have a lot of people who don't like to really get involved with the talking and the presenting element, but they're really good at research and write ups and that kind of stuff. That person is a contributor. So that's another place you can put your follower type in. You also have the opposite of the contributor, which is the politician. That is somebody who is really good at talking and socializing with the other members in the group, but they're really bad at, or they have low performance initiative, meaning that they do arbitrary work or sub average work in terms of being able to do the research, do write ups, and that type of stuff. They sound good, but they don't have the nuts and bolts that go behind it. And unfortunately, we then also have subordinates, which is the opposite of a partner with high performance and relationship initiatives. They just low on everything. These individuals require more supervision. So if I were a leader and I was able to evaluate my group and put them into different categories, I know, okay, I will partners with subordinates. That way, the subordinate will have somebody who would guide them, but the partner will also have somebody that is subordinate to them and will hopefully get the work done but they need a lot of guidance. A contributor will work well with a politician. So the politician will take up the difficult parts that the contributor works with or has problems with. That is presenting and getting up in front of the class and reaching out to others and communicating and stuff like that. You get that politician to work with the contributor, they will make a really good team. So as a leader, one of the things that you have to do is to evaluate the people around you and be able to strategize how best to utilize them and recognize where challenges are likely to come from. You can get challenges from politicians because they talk the big talk, but the issue with a politician is that they don't have the backup for it. The partner is the more serious challenge. Okay, another set of follower types. This is especially um, important in political situations. Is the Bridget model here? This the Hyacinth model. You have these kind of positions that you can find yourselves in, and the idea is that once you know where they fall, where you can categorize individuals in your group, then you can manage them well, or you could utilize particular things like with traitors, for example, you could feed false information to them, and that way you'll set up your opposition. You understand? You do things. Sycophants, you have to be careful with because they're there only because you have something to give to them, and they're there to get as much out of you as possible. So those are people that you have to manage properly. Loyalists are those people you want around you a little bit, but they have to be loyalists and realists together because they have to be able to question your decision making as well. So those are techniques you can utilize in political environments. Another set of um, analysis that we can utilize is this. We'll come back to this one in a later chapter. Um, this is Kelly's 5 followership styles. You have the effective follower, the alienated follower, the passive follower, the conformist, and the pragmatic survivor. So this is more of a larger spectrum that we're looking at because we have at the 0 mark here, we have an X and Y axis, and we're looking at passive behavior versus active behavior on the x-axis, and we have independent critical thinking versus dependent on critical thinking. So we can have negative independent, which takes us into the dependent area. That's why we need that 0 origin because it goes into negative values. Where do you want your people to be? Primarily, you want them to be effective followers or at least in pragmatic survivors. This area, this zone here is your sweet zone. Um, Conformists are dangerous simply because they will they don't think critically but will just act as like your sheep. Passive followers, again, they're easier to manipulate and manage. They don't do anything, okay, but they will be there for you. They make up the numbers, so to speak. Alienated followers is a problem. You need to know if you start to get too many people following into alienated followers, you're going to lose your power base. This again is something that you can utilize for political analysis across the board. All right. So that's something that, whoops, let's undo that quickly. Thought that selected the right thing there. All right, get rid of that. All right. Um, so the main thing with these follower models is or followership models is that you want to be able to evaluate the people around you so that you know what you need to do with them as a leader. Now, as a follower, because we all aren't going to be leaders in every circumstance, we have responsibilities. First is to offer our support to the leader. Two, take initiative. Don't wait for the leader to be telling us what to do. Um, Play counseling and coaching roles, both to other members, other followers, as well as to the leader. Okay? Raise issues and or concerns when necessary. This is something that oftentimes followers neglect to do or are afraid to do based upon the behavior of our leadership. We'll come back to this in a little bit because if you are in a situation where you are afraid to raise issues or concerns with your leader, then there's something wrong with that relationship and you should really be questioning what's happening there. Seek and encourage honest feedback. This is also related to that raising issues because if you are unable to get honest feedback, then there's likely going to be a problem with the leader or the organization that you're working for. Clarify your role and expectations. You need to know what your function is going to be in any organization. What clearly you have to do. If it's too vague, then you're likely to start to get into trouble in terms of not knowing what to do, when to do it, that type of stuff. Showing appreciation, and this is to also to other members of the group, followers, as well as to the leader. Keeping the leader informed. Why do we want the leader informed? Because in order to make good decisions, we need all our information. So keeping the leader informed at all times is going to be critical, and resist inappropriate influence of the leader. So if you have a leader that has some questionable moral values, you need to be able to say, hey, cut that out and resist their behavior. That is something that you can become problematic, especially if you have problems already raising issues and getting honest feedback. That's unfortunate because there's some leaders who don't like these things. They don't want you to tell them what they're doing is wrong. They don't want to give you honest feedback, and they don't want you raising any concerns. That's the kind of maximum leaders we have a tendency to have around us. Um, and it's unfortunate that that's the case because we really need to improve the quality of leadership that we have around us. So, in order to do those particular things that we talked about, those functions, we need to have these competencies. We need to be loyal. We need to be able to work well in changing environments, which means we're acceptable to change. We need to work well on teams as followers. We need to have good critical thinking skills, and we need to know or consider integrity as being the most important thing in in the behavior of ourselves and others. These are the things that are important to us. These are the competencies we need to be able to be an effective follower. Now, because of all those things we just talked about, followership or follower is not the best word I think we can utilize. Now, to save you all some time, there's some suggestions I have. We can call them partners. We can call them associates. We can call them anything else comes to mind. Anybody can add. What would you call somebody with those kind of qualities, competencies, and behaviors that we're looking at in an organization who supports a leader? Can you think of any other phrase besides those?
Acquaintance.
Nope, acquaintance is too vague. This is my husband, my acquaintance. No, that work that way. You understand what I'm saying? Can you think of anything? I said associates and partners, but there are other words that organizations might utilize to help with that. All right, it's not a big thing. Don't worry yourself. All right. Okay. We spoke earlier about the fact that there are different styles of leadership that can.
Colleagues.
There we go. Fantastic, colleagues. That's Miss Crick. Was that Miss Crick? Leanne? Nope. Okay. All right. So we talk.
Colleagues?
Yes. Thank you very much. Colleagues is excellent. I was just confirming whether it was you who was saying it. Thank you. All right. So we talked about the different styles of leadership that you can utilize in the circumstances that you're going to find yourselves operating in. So we have the classical techniques of laissez-faire, autocratic, and participative leadership styles. Those are the classical approaches. So for those of you who haven't done management studies, laissez-faire means you have a very laid-back approach to things, how things, the phrases, how it hang and swing. Autocratic is my way or the highway. Participative is, you try to get input from everybody to make final decisions. And you can see the various issues that will come up with that. Situational would be leadership that emerges based upon the circumstance or situation. So, for example, you might find yourself in a circumstance where your skills and training may put you in a better position to make leadership decisions. This is especially important in emergencies and stuff like that. So, somebody who has a medical background, for example, might find themselves in a situation where there's an accident, and having that background helps to put you in a situational leadership position. When the situation begins to resolve, your leadership is no longer required in that circumstance. Making sense? Emergent is different in the sense that here we're talking about somebody in an organizational structure who is emerging in the organization as a potential leader. And they emerge from the group of individuals and professionals with whom you're working through their experience, qualifications, and simply their attitudes towards the organization. They begin to emerge as a leader within the organization. Transactional and transformational are two sides of a different coin. Transactional is something that you're accustomed to. It's a leadership style that works upon the concept of getting people to do things based upon a reward or punishment that can be given to them based upon that. That's the transaction. You do this, you get paid extra. You do this, you get a day off. You do this, that's the kind of transaction. You do this correct, you get a benefit, or you do it wrong, you get a punishment. That's transactional in nature. We are accustomed to that because that's probably some of the things that our parents have used with us. Transformational, on the other hand, is where it's a leadership style that requires motivation. It's especially utilized in situations where massive organizational change is taking place. You bring in people who have the ability to help engender the motivation to move people through difficult decision making processes and difficult change management policies. Um, because the idea is change itself is difficult and we have to manage that change through it. So transformational leadership usually is a style that is utilized when we're trying to do things that are not necessarily easy to get done within an organization, take a lot more effort. A visionary leadership style would be a style in which you paint pictures of a future that is not easily attainable, but it provides stimulus for getting people to do impossible things and move us forward. Painting a picture of a future that we all want to be part of, and we begin to get motivated and stimulated by that vision and inspired by that leader. So these are the different leadership styles that from time to time you'd have to utilize to help to move people forward or work with. These are the styles that are available. Your capacity to utilize all of these styles is going to be part of your developmental process. Can you be visionary or transformational? Most of us can be transactional, but where do we stand in that spectrum? All right. So who's this leader we keep on talking about? A leader, according to the model that we're looking at, is any person who actively engages with others to accomplish change. And the function or the purpose of this individual is to motivate employees, attain the goals of the organization, ensure that we follow the rules as we move towards the goals that we're looking at, provide continuity and momentum in the processes that we're getting involved with, embrace change, all right? Because if we are there to lead change, we can't be negative towards the change that we're trying to foster. We do things for the common good, and that means for everybody. We behave in a socially responsible manner. We spoke about that before. We actively engage in civic activities and we display civic responsibility. These are some of the purposes. So, social responsibility, we spoke about this before. A personal commitment to the well being of everybody and the world around us, especially the environment. Civic engagement is our sense of responsibility for all of the communities which we engage with. And it's not just work, although a lot of it tends to focus around our work activities, but it's our work, social life, our family, the community where we live, and by extension, the whole world around us. Civic engagement involves these types of activities. I know it's something that the college has been trying to encourage students to start to get involved with college engagement, college life engagement through the work study program, through the student ambassadors program, through the student government. Those are the kind of things that they're trying to get you all involved with, especially since we're trying to build back some of the face-to-face activities that goes on in college. Civic responsibility is our sense of personal responsibility as individuals in terms of our obligations to the community that we operate and live in. So when we talk about that, that's things like this: going to school, obeying laws when necessary, not shirking your responsibility of jury duty. A big one, paying taxes. um, so we speak to things like community service, getting involved with that, voting when necessary. We don't do this one, service in the military, but a lot of countries utilize that as part of their citizens' responsibilities, and displaying patriotism. Um, we're not very good at some of these things, primarily because our society didn't really focus on these things a lot. Uh, um, for one reason or the other, but these are things that we as leaders should be helping through example to get involved with in relation to these things. Now, that then brings us to the question: should a leader know everything? And the answer to that is no. If we don't expect leaders to know everything, then the leader and leadership in general needs to be open to learning and recognizing that collectively we are better at the problem than just one of us, right? Unfortunately, there are lots of leaders out there who are not, they believe they know everything, to their detriment, of course, and they behave in that manner, and therefore they don't see the job site as a place for learning. Now, yes, there are risks in certain types of jobs where learning on the job is problematic because of the negative impact and almost immediate negative impact it can have. But again, you have to realize that nobody arrives at a position of perfection. Nobody can be perfect, but nobody arrives there without breaking a couple of eggs along the way. All right. So in the organization, it's important for us to make sure that the environment that we create is open to learning, to making mistakes, and sharing the knowledge that we've gained from the process of learning together. This is something that is important. This expectation of doing things one time, the first time, and getting it right is impractical and puts unnecessary pressure on organizations and individuals simultaneously. If, however, we are in an environment where, if you make a mistake, you get opportunities to fix it and, help with the learning curve. Basically, this is what we're talking about, a learning curve kind of situation. Then, it makes for a better environment for us to work together. COSTAT is like that. We're supposed to be creating lifelong learners. Um, and in order to do that, we have to recognize, from various learning models, what is happening. So this learning model talks about three components: your focus, your willingness, and your capacity or your capabilities. The intersection of the three is what you end up being able to do. So we need you to focus on, or the model is saying that in order for us to be able to do things, we have to blend together our focus, our willingness, and develop the capacity or the capability to do something. Um, which means putting things into practice and learning from it. That's one model. This is another model that some of you all, especially those from a science background, should be familiar with. It's called the scientific method. You start with an idea, you apply that idea, you look at what happens in the experience, which means you conduct an experiment. From the experiment, you draw conclusions, reflections, and that either takes you back to the application process, where you go through that process again several times before you're able to discern from those experiments some sort of critical outcome that allows you to submit that work to the rest of us as a theory, and that theory is then applied in the real world. So this is that learning model. You go through this process like this, and this should be reminiscent of the scientific process of how hypothesis testing takes place or how theories are created. Some of you are familiar with this model? Yes, no, maybe? Radiology people, you all familiar with this? Huh. Wow, interesting.
Yes, sir.
Well, I was wondering. All right, so the most effective organizations in the world are actually those that are learning environments. Think of Google, COSAT is one, I should say. Um, any organization that is a learning environment is one in which it creates this whole vitality of learning together. Um, it's something that's really important, that if organizations that remain relevant in life are those that constantly try to learn and relearn doing things. All right. So because if at the minute you stop learning, you become irrelevant. Just remember that, guys. That's why even when you hear about people retiring, you hear about people retiring and getting involved with this type of activity and doing this and doing that, and that's because in order for them to remain relevant, it's important for them to, um, constantly keep on learning. All right. Let's think about it from that perspective. Another aspect of learning is experiential learning. Um, so we come to information by one of two ways, either through concrete experiences or through abstract conceptualization. So if we look at that process in this model here, we can either start from the experience, what happened, we make observations, think about it, abstract conceptualization, try it again, and learn something more. Or we can start from thinking about it, trying an experiment, going through the experience, reflecting and making observations, and coming back and rethinking of it. Think about it from this, but experiential learning has to do with this process. The amount of things that we learn through experiential learning is so powerful. It's probably one of the best ways in which we learn. In fact, it's sort of like you can't teach somebody what it means to get burnt until you actually, you get burnt. You'll kind of get an idea what we're talking about there. You can't teach somebody what it's like to get burnt. They have to feel it for themselves. We have this saying, who do haters feel? Anybody knows those sayings, or am I just blowing smoke? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we know it.
You know it? All right, then. Some of you all know hair, just how to feel, right? You know that one too? All right. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is that good leadership and good leadership organizations have to be able to value learning across the board. It's really, really important that learning is part of the organizational process. So in wrapping up this chapter, I wanted to take this quotation from a student from the text. Leadership is a role open to anyone. Leadership is living by a personal set of rules in which you motivate others to do the right thing, be engaged in the world, and to listen to others and their concerns. Leadership is focused on the other person. And this is the takeaway we need to have with this model that we're going to be looking at. This model, the relational leadership model, is going to turn our attention away from the focus on the leader onto the relationship the leader has with other people, because the importance of other people in leadership activities cannot be it can't be emphasized enough, because you can't do anything without others. So the importance of other people in a leadership model is going to be critical. And that fortunately is because most leadership models that I've read about, and next week we're going to be looking at the emergence of leadership theory throughout the years and how that has evolved over time. It always focuses on the behavior and actions and activities of the leader themselves, not on the relationship and not on what's happening with the other folks involved in the process. So we're going to find ourselves paying attention to that. Final quotation I want to leave you all with is: leadership is not the privilege of the few. Both you and I can and should be leaders. So this is where we begin a journey into looking at the relational leadership model. Again, this is the vast majority of things that I've dealt with here comes from this book. Um, in fact, the entire chapter. All right. Do we have any questions that we want to ask? Anything that you want clarification on? Anything from what we spoke about today that you're interested in hearing more about? Of course, you can go read the chapter and have a look at things. I hope this gives you also a better idea of how how you might be able to go about presenting your work, so to speak. That makes sense. Remember what you're trying to do is to engage with the class and try and get you to engage the material. You can see that your level of engagement is fairly low. I had to call on people specifically. People weren't just willingly opening up and saying what they would like. That's an important element that I'll be looking out for. All right. Okay, so I'm still begging people to indicate to me if they're okay, they understood what took place, they're all right.
Yes, sir. I good. Class is good.
Good. All right. All right. So I'll be putting up
Good
the
so
recording.
far.
So far, and everything's fairly understandable. I don't see a problem with you understanding the concepts. It's just that there's so much of it that we're going to be going through in the next three chapters. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. If there are no questions, let me stop the recording. Thank you for coming.